be interested in what the options they would put forward are. But it's very important to say that, because I don't want us, in pursuing a progressive struggle, to fall into the trap of being called anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, and intent on destroying Israel. It's a political ploy that seeks to find legitimacy for Israel's oppression of Palestine. So we haven't changed in terms of government policy. Of course, you are revolutionary and radical. It can be your position, but I'm putting to you what the position of the government is. It's important that I do that, because I don't want out there in the public domain to have the impression created that I altered by dint of presence here, the policy of the government. It's very, very clear, and I think I should table it here. And as I say, in my view, and I've said this to my friends, other foreign ministers, as the leader of the Students for Palestine indicated, it is for the Palestinian people to decide the form of state, the nature of democracy, and who leads them, not us. Not foreign ministers from any other country in the world. It is the Palestinian people's decision. So we must always and will be led by them. It's important that we remember that. Now to my remarks. Well, I thank the program director for the kind welcome to all of us, and I really congratulate all the speakers before me for their insightful reflections on the question of the self-determination, freedom and justice for the people of Palestine. I thank you all as well for being here. I wish my lectures had been as well attended. Often this lecture hall would kind of be a quarter full, and the students would sometimes be very fed up with you because I was unlucky to always have that 8 o'clock slot. So it's a real honor for me to speak to you tonight about developments in Palestine and the mobilization around the world in support of the Palestinian people, a support that is growing more vociferous by the day. And I would say it is due to you, the people of South Africa, that the world is now standing with and behind the people of Palestine. And I thank you, the people of South Africa. I say that advisedly. In the majority, the people of South Africa support the just cause for freedom of the people of Palestine. Those who are against are a small Zionist minority. The majority of South Africans are fully behind the cause for freedom. And we need to say that more and more, because I've not seen people on the streets saying we must stop. I've just heard some small voices somewhere, and those can be ignored. Young people worldwide have become increasingly angry. They've become increasingly organized, and they're fast becoming a moral army with the propensity to change things and make a difference. As Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. The youth of today, all over the world, are making their voices heard and are no longer accepting the narrative in the mainstream media, but are talking about disinvestment and boycott, and rightly saying that this stance has nothing to do with being anti-Semitic. For them, the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, to enjoying human rights, and to be protected from the genocidal onslaught they are facing is a matter for young people of social justice. The wave of protests at United States universities and colleges in support of Palestine is unprecedented and represents a sea change in the public opinion of American youth. There is now a domino effect, with Belgian and Dutch students having also joined the Gaza protest wave. This week, students in Belgium and the Netherlands occupied parts of universities in Ghent and Amsterdam to protest against Israel's war in Gaza, joining international student protests that began on US campuses. At a campus of the University of Amsterdam, hundreds of students set up camp, pitching dozens of tents and barricading access, calling for the university to end their partnerships with Israel. In the United States, Columbia University in New York has been the epicenter of the current student-led campus actions. This university has a history of using disinvestment as a tool of protest that far predates the encampment that the students launched on the 17th of April this year. In 1968, Columbia University became the epicenter of the anti-war protest, spurred on by the university's ties to the defense industry. This eventually led to the resignation of the then president of the university. These protests spread to West Berlin and then to Paris, which triggered 10 weeks of student protests against the Vietnam War. 500,000 workers ended up marching through the streets of Paris against the war in Vietnam. We need to encourage similar global activism today. Although many media outlets cite Colombia's 1968 sittings against the Vietnam War as somewhat of a parallel, Omar Barghouti, Tanaquil Jones, and Barbara Ransby wrote in The Guardian that the university's 1985 anti-apartheid student sit-ins are even more relevant to today's protests. The Coalition for a Free South Africa successfully pushed Columbia University to divest from apartheid South Africa. Nearly 3 decades later, a campaign called Columbia Prison Divest also forced the university to pull investments from for-profit prison companies. These are activist students. 4 years ago, Columbia's undergraduate school passed a historic student vote calling for divestment from Israel. The fact that students at Brown University, Northwestern University, and the University of Minnesota have successfully forced their schools' administrations to vote on divesting from Israel is a major step toward delegitimizing Israel and its apartheid system. Protests over the genocide in Gaza have spread to 30 other United States universities and colleges, even at the conservative Ivy League university, Yale, where students have demanded that their university divest from weapons manufacturing companies. Students at Harvard have also made their voices heard, which is momentous considering that the university was founded in 2020 to have invested nearly $200 million of its $40 billion endowment in companies with ties to Israel's occupation of Palestine. This week, Harvard and MIT universities threatened to suspend students continuing pro-Palestine encampments that have been up for the past 2 weeks. Students are demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and that universities divest from Israel. Jewish students at each of these universities have participated in the protests, insisting that Israel is not acting in their name. The UCLA Jewish faculty and staff wrote an open letter to the UCLA community calling for amnesty for arrested protesters and argued that critiques of Israel and Zionism are not presumptively anti-Semitic. The Jewish faculty and staff stated in the letter that they support an immediate ceasefire in Gaza unconditionally and strongly support the provision of the necessary resources needed to rebuild Gaza, including humanitarian aid. I have put all these before you because I'm putting proposals for actions before you. Jewish students were part of an encampment which was dismantled by force. And those students associated with Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voices for Peace were arrested between April 30th and 2nd of May. The student activism we are witnessing in the United States is now an unstoppable train. The BDS movement, launched by Palestinian unions and other civil society institutions in 2005, explains on its website that Israel is only able to maintain its oppressive regime over the Palestinian people and avoid accountability for its genocide against 2.3 million Palestinians in the besieged and occupied Gaza Strip because of international state, corporate, and institutional complicity. It is up to all of us to ensure that the institutions we work for, study under, and are involved with do not contribute financially or otherwise to the oppression of the Palestinians. I hear your proposals for further action and sanctions by government, but you've got a test to undertake first. Vote ANC back in. That not happen, this item will be off the agenda of South Africa. The ICJ case will be withdrawn and we will hang our heads in shame. This week, convoys of Israeli occupation forces had tanks crossing the border toward Rafah, accompanied by waves of violent air and artillery bombardment. Occupation aircraft carried out fire belts and launched violent raids on the neighborhoods east of Rafah. The carnage that is unfolding in Rafah, which was supposed to be the last safe refuge for 1.4 million defenseless, displaced, and starving Palestinian civilians, is reprehensible. We are not powerless to make it stop. Each of us has to find our voice, and together we can join forces to fight against this inhumanity. I am often embarrassed by how I've now come to be associated with the question of Palestine as though it's an individual. It is a decision of our government. Our president, President Ramaphosa, is fully behind it. The cabinet took a clear decision. So it's not Naledi Pandor. I'm merely the hand. I'm not the sole person. So I feel a bit bad that you make it as though, I'm some hero. I'm not. I'm an executioner of a decided policy. Our government of South Africa and our ruling party, the African National Congress, have been doing their part, and we've spent a great deal of time, resources, and effort to use the legal mechanisms at our disposal to seek justice for the people of Palestine. And I want to assure you, despite all the lies, I don't have links with Hamas, I'm not that great. And it's an absolute lie that the legal costs for the case at the ICJ are being paid for by Iran. This is part of an ongoing attempt to smear me personally and to smear the ANC and the government of South Africa. And all of it are lies based on the fear that we will be successful, because as South Africa, having fought the kind of struggle we fought against apartheid, we are going to steer and support the Palestinian people to freedom. People around the world have commended our government for taking the bold initiative to take Israel to the International Court of Justice earlier this year. And because of the popularity of South Africa, I've now had to arrange to get off aeroplanes faster than anyone else, because I get all these hugs and kisses and cheers. So it's amazing the way the world feels about South Africa, because you have restored moral consciousness. Ruled in their ruling, and I hope you have read the judgment, very interesting. They ruled that what is happening in Gaza is plausibly genocide. I heard a young Israeli gentleman yesterday saying they didn't say that. I don't know which judgment he read, but I was there in the court. That's exactly what the judges said. They instructed Israel to stop all its genocidal actions, its military onslaught against the Palestinian people, and to ensure the immediate provision of humanitarian aid. As expected, Israel has ignored this ruling in its entirety, as it has previous rulings of the ICJ on the apartheid wall, and it continues to violate not only international law, but the Geneva Convention. But what is important, we have taken Israel to the highest global court, and it has been found to have failed in terms of international law, and that finding is known to the world. The impunity that has existed for many, many decades is now revealed and open to the world.
Yes.
Most worrying is that our international bodies responsible for ensuring international peace and security have seemed paralyzed in the face of this genocide, given the political agendas of the major powers of the world. And this means all of us need to fight even harder to ensure the reform of the UN Security Council so that it can fulfill its intended mandate and protect civilians in armed conflict. We need this peace enforcement capability strongly in the United Nations, and as we present as South Africa our proposals for reform of the United Nations, this matter of protection of the innocent in times of conflict is something we must put at the front of our proposals. Now, as I answered to my colleague, the Honorable Freedom Front leader in the House a few months ago, when he posed a question of why South Africa is bothering with this issue, I indicated that given our history of oppression under apartheid, South Africa has an obligation to act and to support the just cause for freedom. I reminded him that he is fortunate that he lives in a forgiving South Africa. He lives in a country governed and in which its residents and its citizens have taken on the difficult mantle of reconciliation. And after winning freedom and having a majority, have not gone around marauding and murdering. our fellow former oppressors. And having had that generosity from those who were oppressed, it is only correct that the former oppressors must show a similar generosity to others. So, given our history of oppression under apartheid, our academic institutions in South Africa have a special responsibility to show their solidarity with the Palestinian people in the midst of the genocidal campaign being waged against them. Now, one of the things that happens as you get older is you acquire an amazing amount of history and experience. You know, young people have been saying, when are you going, to me? You're old, you've been around since 94, you should disappear, it's our turn now, and all of this. And I agree, it's their turn. But this weight of history...
Not over yet. The struggle is not over
knowledge is very important. I remember in 1995, when we were crafting the Bill of Rights of the Constitution of South Africa. I was the convener of the subcommittee on the Bill of Rights. And one of the hot issues was the clause on freedom of expression. And particularly what that clause would say about freedom to do research and to carry on an academic enterprise without interference from the state. We had experience of institutions in our country under apartheid working very closely with the apartheid state. So our sentiment wasn't always toward the level of expression being demanded. But in the end, as Democrats, we were persuaded that we should include a clause that would allow free expression, particularly in the academic setting. So today, that free expression must be utilized to support the people of Palestine. When we were struggling against apartheid, universities around the world were not silent. And they supported the academic boycott and divested links with apartheid South Africa. Universities pressured governments around the world, our universities, pressured governments around the world to impose sanctions against our government and reinforced our struggle and contributed to ending the apartheid system. I know this, I was part of it, and I know it very, very well. Given the critical role that international solidarity played in South Africa's liberation struggle, the support of South African universities is especially important at this moment. Our universities are bound by the constitutional obligations of our state to promote a human rights culture and social justice in terms of domestic and international law. Universities are meant to lead in using knowledge and influence to advance society by promoting social justice, especially our universities in the global south. We should be progressive and we should be leading. The public positions adopted by South African academic institutions, such as this one, UWC, Nelson Mandela University, and Forte, have set a tone of humanism and anti-apartheid solidarity. Unfortunately, some of our more influential universities have been implicated in doing business with Israeli companies, of having relations with Israeli institutions and companies, and of mistreating pro-Palestinian activists. Some universities have contracts with companies that have been complicit in aiding and abetting of Israeli apartheid and occupation of Palestine by providing fuel, weapons, finance, private security, technology, and intelligence. Some have even accepted donations from the Embassy of Israel. We commend those institutions which have made official statements calling for a ceasefire and immediate humanitarian aid to Gaza. The UCT Senate has resolved that no UCT academic should collaborate with any Israeli academic on any research project if that academic is identified with the Israeli Defense Force. Stellenbosch University Senate members have called for an end to the brutal and barbaric destruction of Gaza, stating that no crimes can justify genocidal actions in retaliation. Unfortunately, the Senate failed to pass a resolution on the Israeli-Palestine crisis, on the genocide and destruction of scholarship and education in Gaza, as it was not agreed to by the majority of Senate members, despite the fact of scholasticide in Palestine, with all the universities, majority of schools, and other academic institutions having been bombed by the Israeli Defense Force. Still, that Senate could not agree the resolution. The University of Fort Hare has called for an immediate ceasefire that must be enforced by the United Nations, they state, and the smooth passage of humanitarian aid into Gaza, equitably distributed throughout the whole territory of the Gaza Strip. The university has expressed its support for our government's call for the International Criminal Court to investigate international war crimes committed by Israel and its leaders. Fort Hare has also committed not to pursue any institutional links with Israeli institutions, as these have played a key role, they said, in supporting settler colonial oppression and apartheid, and have been complicit in grave violations of human rights, including developing weaponry, military doctrines, and legal justification for the indiscriminate mass targeting of Palestinians. The university has committed itself to helping end the 17-year siege on Gaza and called for the immediate release of Palestinian academic staff and students who are being held in terms of Israel apartheid legislation and in violation of international law. We applaud Fort Hare for the strong stand it has taken, as well as other universities that continue to express solidarity with Palestinian universities, scholars, and students. While it is true that the Israeli occupation of Palestine land is not the only illegal occupation in the world, it is, however, the longest and the deadliest one. Moreover, it is also the only place in the world from which a call was issued by the occupied people to the international community to use economic activism tools such as boycott and divestment to help end the occupation. The devastation that Israel has wrought on institutions of learning in Gaza is nothing other than despicable and unforgivable. According to a report by the United Nations Human Rights Office on April 18 this year, UN experts have expressed grave concern over the pattern of attacks on schools, universities, teachers, lecturers, and students in the Gaza Strip, raising serious alarm over the systemic destruction of the Palestinian education system. The report states that with more than 80% of schools in Gaza damaged or destroyed, it may be reasonable to ask if there is an intentional effort to comprehensively destroy the Palestinian education system, an action that is known as scholasticide. The term refers to the systemic obliteration of education through the arrest, detention, or killing of teachers, students, and academic staff, and the destruction of educational infrastructure. All this is happening as we watch and say nothing. After 6 months of military assault, more than 5,479 students, 261 teachers, and 95 university professors have been killed in Gaza. Over 7,819 students and 756 teachers have been injured, with numbers growing every day. At least 60% of educational facilities, including 13 public libraries, have been damaged or destroyed, and at least 625,000 primary and secondary school students and over 100,000 college and university students in Gaza have no access to education. The Israeli Defense Force has damaged or destroyed 9 out of every 10 schools, at least 65 of which were UN relief agency-run facilities, sheltering thousands of displaced civilians. Between October and January this year, the IDF bombed all the universities in Gaza. None of us have the luxury of turning a blind eye to this travesty of justice, especially when information on what is happening on the ground is swirling around us. Now is the time for you and I to take up the baton and fight for the very survival of the people in Gaza and West Bank. This is what our struggle veterans would have expected of us. I urge you all to support the efforts of our government and that of our ruling party, so that our foreign policy agenda is not hijacked by the likes of the reactionary opposition in this country. Lest we forget that not so long ago, the leader of the Democratic Alliance said that one man's genocide is another man's freedom. I urge our students to go out and vote for a party that will maintain our independent and progressive foreign policy. And I urge our students who are literate people, they should write. Why are you allowing Daily Maverick to have the kind of articles that they have? I fully support freedom of expression. But I don't support expression being used to support genocide. I don't support expression being used to try and blind us to the truth. And I expect that you, as intellectuals, you, as knowledge creators, that you will take up your pen and paper, and that you will write, that you will petition, that you will protest, that you will not allow lies to be told. We lived under oppression, but we knew that we could communicate. We would put out pamphlets. They would reach millions of people. We could call a strike and everybody would stay home. And nobody would know who called it. Why are you allowing this? Why are you silent? So I'm not by any means excited at you trying to make me a hero. I'm not. I'm just doing the work of government. But for true effect, I need your activism. The people of Palestine need your activism. You cannot sit by and watch me. You must go. So I expect next time when someone writes an article, a very renowned, respected person, and calls Naledi Pandor an idiot who doesn't understand foreign policy, I hope you'll write a response and say, this woman knows foreign policy and we back her fully. there is no struggle in the world which is won by observation. There is no struggle in the world which is won by non-action. There is no struggle in the world which is supported by watching television news. You support a struggle by being active. You don't have to be in the trenches, but you must do something. And that is what I hope the students of South Africa will show the world, that we too can do something. Thank you very much.
Viva! Viva! Viva Naledi Pandor! Viva! Viva! Forward to the struggles of the Palestinian people! Forward! Forward! Comrades,